Welcome to Inspired Living with Keri Murphy, the podcast, where as your host each and every week, I am going to inspire you and empower you to share your message and step into that big vision you see for yourself. I'll be bringing you celebrity interviews, influencer insights, and my personal tips from decades as an on-camera talent, TV host, media expert, and entrepreneur, so you can build a brilliant seven-figure brand. Because when you're inspired, you inspire others. So let's go. I was out for a walk not too long ago, listening to a podcast. Maybe like you, that's the only time I have to listen to a podcast. And I heard Barbara Huson talking about women and wealth. And I knew at that very moment, I had to get her on this show. Barbara Huson, formerly known as Barbara Stanny, is the leading authority on women, wealth, and power. She's a best-selling author, a financial therapist, teacher, and wealth coach who has helped millions of women take charge of their finances and their lives. And on this episode, she shared with us, what is it, right, that keep women from breaking through that 6 and 7 figure ceiling? Why is it that we think differently about money than men do? And she gave 3 very practical, easy tips that we can start doing right now to start changing our wealth code and to start investing. And I love that she said creating wealth is really about loving yourself first. And she shared about her personal story of growing up in a very wealthy family and finding herself with a $1 million tax bill with 3 children at home and no idea how she was going to pay it. This interview is so insightful. We're both so passionate about helping women step into their power and create more wealth in the world. And if you are ready to step into that in your life, you are going to absolutely love this interview with Barbara Huson. Barbara, I am so excited to have you on the show today because if there's one thing that really gets me fired up, it is talking about women and money. And it blows my mind when you look at statistics that only between 2 to 4% of women-owned businesses ever make it past the 7-figure mark. And I think for me, maybe because I've lost it all and I've built great businesses, there's a lot that goes on with women and mindset. And I know you're going to be sharing so much with us today around your expertise, but it's my understanding that your dad was the R in H&R Block. You grew up pretty privileged and then had a experience that really got you thinking differently about money and wealth. So can you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, my father was the R of H&R Block. I grew up wealthy. His only advice to me was don't worry, which I loved. And of course, under those words was the unspoken assumption there'll always be a man to take care of you, which I love too. Mm-hmm. I married a man who was a stockbroker, so he was perfect. But I found out very early in my marriage is that he was a compulsive gambler. And for 15 years, I'd find out many, many, many times he was gambling my money, my inheritance away. And here's the insane part, Keri, is I continued to let him manage the money because that's how terrified I was and intimidated by anything financial. Finally, after 15 years, we got a divorce and I decided I just don't want to deal with money. Well, I have this theory that if you don't deal with your money will deal with you. Mm-hmm. And I got tax bills for back taxes my ex didn't pay, for illegal deals he got us in, back tax bills for way over $1 million.
$1 million.
Way over $1 million.
Oh my gosh, Barbara. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's like, oh my God. And my ex had left the country and I didn't have.
Of course. Okay.
Not anywhere close. And my father wouldn't lend me the money. Mm. That's when I knew I had to get smart. So I was reading books. I was going to classes, all the things they tell you to do. And my eyes would glaze over and my brain would fog up. But I had to get smart. I had 3 daughters. I was not going to raise those girls on the street. I wasn't even talking to my parents. I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I swear to God, Keri, I believe when you make a commitment, like no backdoor commitment.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk through fire to make it happen. The universe revolves to help you reach your goal. Mm-hmm. And I was a journalist writing for the San Francisco Business Times, and I was hired for a freelance project to interview women who were smart with money. And those interviews changed my life. I not only got smart about my money, but I I wrote a book, my first book, Prince Charming Isn't Coming, How Women Get Smart About Money. Suddenly I had this whole new career. I was traveling around the country doing financial education for women, but I couldn't make money no matter how hard I tried. Interviewed women who made lots of money, and I started making six figures before I even finished writing my second book, Secrets of Six Figure Women. And now, 7 books later, here I am, a financial therapist and wealth coach and an expert on women, wealth, and power.
I mean, I just love serendipity, don't you? I mean, my goodness, you probably couldn't have looked back and go, oh, yeah, sure. All these dots are going to connect divinely, right? For me to now teach what it is that you teach. I love that story. And I'm sure that there are women that can really relate, Barbara, to staying in a situation because they're so scared to look at the money. And it's so much easier, I think, whether you're a business owner or not, to just, the prayer of, I hope there's still some in the account, right? Like, please. I remember when I had filed bankruptcy when I lost my business in 2008. I now have a 7-figure business, but there's still that, oh my gosh, there's money in the account. Okay, we're good, right? And instead of looking at it in a more strategic way. And so I want to hear more. First of all, I would love to hear what you gathered from those interviews of 6-figure women, but you call yourself a wealth therapist?
A financial therapist.
A financial therapist. Give us the definition of that.
So my training is in psychotherapy. I have my master's degree in counseling psychology. I didn't want to be a straight psychologist. I decided after a couple of years, really focusing, because with finances, there's 4 prongs to me to helping women over their difficulties with money. There's 4 prongs. There's what I call the outer work of wealth, the inner work of wealth, the higher work of wealth, and the deeper work of wealth. The outer work of wealth is, knowing the difference between a stock and a bond, understanding how to negotiate, all the things that they teach you.
Right.
Get stuck with the outer work. That's when you need to go to the inner work. That is when you need to look at your attitudes, beliefs, and decisions that you made about yourself and money that are holding you back. And there's also what I call the higher work of wealth, and that's the spiritual aspect. That most women, when we have food on the table, when we have a roof over our head, when we have financial stability, we want to make more money, but that's not what drives us.
Right.
What drives us is the opportunity to help others, to do what we're here on this planet to do. And that's what I call the higher work of wealth. And that's the real motivation. And then there's the deeper work of wealth, which is my latest body of work. And that's understanding how the mind and the brain work together. And when you can understand how to make the mind and brain work together, you can really cut through the learning curve and speed it up and really diminish resistance so quickly.
Oh, I love that so much. And I think I heard you talking about that on another interview, and I was on a walk and I was like, yes, because, having my background in neurolinguistics and quantum physics, and I love the brain. It's this fascinating thing, and yet it blocks so much for so many of us simply because we don't know how to bring it all together. Right. And I love when you said the higher wealth. To me, that is the expression of inspired living, to be able to do something that you love, to be able to make enough money to take care of you and have enough to put it back into the world and feel significant and giving value. And so I really love that. So how do you work with women then on establishing those 4 pillars in their own life?
I work with them. I use it through my work, establishing those 4 pillars in their life by integrating that through the work that we look at. When the outer work doesn't happen, when they don't understand, they can't seem to save, they seem to overspend. Mm-hmm. When they can't seem to control their behavior, that's when we look at the emotional, psychological damage that's been done that's causing them to do that. That's when we look at what their deepest purpose is that will motivate them to do the hard stuff. But the most important thing I've learned is when I brought neuroscience into my work about 6 years ago, that's when my work started really changing.
Yeah.
Because the brain controls your behavior. Everything you do is controlled by the brain.
Right.
But the brain is shaped by the mind. And the brain is a physical organ, but the mind is a non-physical entity in the source of our thoughts and our feelings. So when you can understand how what flows through the mind shapes the brain and change your mind while you're changing your brain, things can happen very quickly, magically.
Oh, I love that, Barbara. When you were interviewing early on all of those women that were creating multiple six figures, and I loved on a previous call, we were talking about, wealth isn't a number. And I'd love to hear what your definition of wealth is, as well as, what was the common denominator that you saw with these women that were making six figures and beyond?
My definition of wealth, there's three levels of financial development. There's survival, stability, and affluence. Survival is not enough. Stability is just enough. And affluence is wealth or more than enough. I define wealth as you have more than enough and you know it.
Yeah.
Because wealth without well-being, what's the point?
Okay, let's just say that one more time. Wealth without well-being. What's the point? Yes.
Interesting. The word wealth comes from the Latin root weal, W-E-A-L, which means well-being. So the whole purpose of creating wealth is to create well-being for ourselves and others. So wealth is you have more than enough and you know it. I've had many, many clients, even you too, I'm sure you too, who are maybe worth millions, but they're still financially insecure. That's not what I want for everybody. I want wealth is when money is not a source of stress or distraction, but is a tool for creating a more meaningful, gratifying life.
Yes, absolutely. So what was the common denominator that you saw, Barbara, in those women?
Which one?
The ones that you interviewed.
Oh, I've interviewed lots of books. So
Right. Yes. For the six figures, the women that had surpassed that.
I'll tell you the common denominator. There were six. There were a bunch of common denominators, but the one that made the most impact on me, I was a chronic under-earner for 50 years before I wrote that book. And these women, I interviewed 154 that made 6 and 7 figures. They were all very confident, as I expected. As we got deeper into the interviews, everyone struggled with fear. Everyone struggled with self-doubt. 95% felt like a fraud and was terrified other people were going to find out. And I thought, well, that's just like me. But the difference between them and me is they didn't let the fear or the self-doubt or feeling like a fraud stop them. They did it anyway. And that was the turning point for me. When I said, okay, I'm afraid and I'm going to do it anyway. And that to me is the number one requirement for going to the next level.
Yes.
Willingness to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I'm specializing in teaching women how to be visible and putting themselves out there and getting themselves on camera. Barbara, it's the same thing. Everyone has the fear, has the self-doubt, has that fraud, feeling in there. And to feel that and do it anyway, I think is really, I agree with you. I've interviewed many successful people and we all are human, right? We all have ego. We all have that scarcity fear sometimes that creeps in, but you do it anyway. It's just being more courageous, I think.
It's being more courageous, but there's another piece there that I've just really started studying 6 years ago. It's being more courageous, but there are many, many that cannot, because our brains were from 500, how many millions ago?
Right.
10 million years ago, our brains have developed with one purpose in mind, one purpose only, and that is for survival and self-protection and safety.
Right.
When you have experienced trauma in your life, what happens is that when anything seems dangerous or seems to threaten our safety, our thinking brain shuts down, our fear centers activated, and we go into fight
or flight, right.
Or freeze.
Yeah.
And so that's so much of my work is healing the trauma that prevents women. It's not just the lack of courage. It's what trauma does to the brain. And I think that's important for women to understand when they can't move forward.
Right. That there's nothing wrong with you. There's just something blocking you that's keeping you where you are. And when you uncover that and you work through that, then you'll create a different outcome for yourself. And that's something, Barbara, that you work with them on in discovering and uncovering. And do I dare say healing?
To me, financial success is not just a practical process. It is a spiritual practice and it is a healing journey. It's rite of passage into our power. So yes, you dare say healing, because for me, it is very much, and maybe that's why I call myself a financial therapist, because it's much about healing the deep wounds that keep us stuck.
Is that what made you write your latest book, Rewire for Wealth?
What made me write my latest book, Rewire for Wealth, is it was 2000 and It was just after my last book, Sacred Success, came out. So it was about 2014. And this last book was very popular. Did really well. Was having great success, and something happened. I started losing interest in my work. Things started really bothering me, and I didn't know what it was. And this feeling started bubbling up that something's missing in what I do, that I could be so much more effective if I understood something. It was very bizarre, I have to tell you. And it was bothering me so much that I stepped back and I stopped seeing new clients and I stopped speaking and I stopped doing a lot of things that were taking my time. And I just surrendered. And I just said, okay, if there's something missing, tell me, or maybe I'm meant to stop working. And so in this kind of dilemma, I'm on my email one day and I see an article about neuroscience come in. And I read that. I knew nothing about neuroscience. And I read this article and it was like my brain lit up like a Christmas tree, I'm sure. It said, this is the missing piece. And it was like so divinely ordained that I started bringing in neuroscience to speed up this process. It's been phenomenal. And so that was why I wrote my next book.
That is fantastic. I'm really excited to get my hands on it. We'll make sure. I mean, you've written so many amazing books, Barbara. My next question is, when do you have time? And what is your process when you say, okay, I'm going to write a new book? What does that look like for you? I'm just dying to know.
I'll tell you, it's the same process. So I actually have 8 books, but my first one was in the 80s and that's no longer in print. So I have 7 books out. And what I do is the idea comes to me. Usually, in some way, it comes to me. And then I set about researching, just reading, talking to people, online, doing all of that. And then when I research, then I really feel like I have enough. Then I write the proposal. Then I send the proposal to my agent. Then my agent sends it to publishers. And 7 books, every publisher turned it down but one. Every single publisher turned it down but one. And I just am so grateful to that one publisher.
That's amazing. And it's also inspiring, right? Because, look at your track record, look at the career that you've created for yourself, doing this amazing work in the world. And still, people are going to say no, and I think that comes back to, the neuroscience, the tenacity, the getting that one publisher or that one fan or that one client to jump on board and believe in what you're doing. And that's where we all start. I know so many people that have written books and sent out proposals and there were so many no's, but they kept putting it out there or they kept tweaking the proposal and they become a best-selling author. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you telling us that. When it comes to men and women, can you share why is it that men have an easier time maybe making money or investing their money or looking at their numbers versus women?
Right, there's several reasons. One is I think it's evolutionary. From the beginning of time, men were the hunter and gatherers. They went out, they killed the pigs, and the women cooked up the bacon. That's how the division of labor was. And all that's changed. So that's in our collective unconsciousness. But also when I started studying neuroscience, I saw women and men process financial information differently. And for example, men are much more performance oriented. Women are much more relationship oriented. Want to know how good the stock's going to do. Women want to know, how can I help others with my money? But the biggest thing, I think the thing that really got me to write this next book, Rewire for Wealth, is that for men, when they think of the market, when they think of going in investing, they see it as a challenge. They get very excited.
Right.
Women see investing and going into the market as a threat. And so we shut. But the good news of that is that that's why we are much better investors. Women on average make at least more money overall than men as investors because we're more conservative, because we jump in and out. We don't trade. We don't speculate. We're long-term investors, which is basically the secret to success in the market.
You know what I find interesting, Barbara, especially now in this place in my life and career where, I'm just starting to invest in the stock market, hadn't done it before. I find it interesting and I'll leave it at that. I find it interesting and looking at investing in real estate. But I will say that I feel a bit of like an anomaly in my peer group because so few women do invest. What advice do you have around that? And why is it that women don't invest in the stock market or they don't invest their money in real estate or, they don't invest at all?
So wealth does not come from what you earn. Wealth comes from what you do with what you earn.
Can you say that one more time?
Wealth does not come from what you earn. Wealth comes from what you do with what you earn.
Mm.
One of the eye-openers, one of the surprises I got when I interviewed 6 and 7-figure women for Secrets of 6-Figure Women is how few of them were wealthy. They made a ton of money, but they were so busy making money that they weren't saving it. They were spending, and they weren't taking care of their money. I interviewed a woman who made, this was in the year 2000. She made $750,000 a year. She was an executive in Hollywood in the motion picture industry, over $750,000. And she said, Barbara, I feel one step away from a refrigerator carton on the street. I said, how is that possible? She said, my biggest investment were shoes in Neiman Marcus. We don't understand investing. It's scary. Listen, I spent 50 some years of my life terrified of it. It seemed like so overwhelming.
Right.
Then when I started learning, it doesn't take a lot of time to get smart. It does not take a lot of money to invest. It's so much simpler than you think, although there's a whole industry wanting to convince you otherwise. And it's never, ever, ever, ever too late to start. And if you want to learn about investing, I'm going to give you 3 steps.
Wonderful. Give them to us.
And also, I have a free ebook on my site. It's called, So You've Been Successful, Now What? The Successful Woman's Guide to Investing. And so 3 steps, because it's small steps consistently taken that create the remarkable results. You do these 3 steps for 2-3 months, and you will be amazed at the difference.
All right, we're ready.
Okay, first step. Every day, read something about money, even if it's just for a minute or 2. Even if you open the newspaper to the business section and you just peruse the headline. Even if you're waiting in line at the supermarket, you pick up Money magazine instead of People. Even before you go to bed at night, you take a finance book, preferably mine, but you take a finance book and you only read 1 paragraph, because so much of getting smart or smarter is just familiarizing yourself with the jargon, the current trends. I call it the osmosis school of learning. This is exactly what I did. Every week, have a conversation about money. Preferably be with someone that knows more than you. It is our secrecy and silence that keeps us stuck. You know, when's the last time you sat down with a friend or a colleague or a family member and said, how did you get smart? What were some of the mistakes you made? What's the best advice someone gave you? What advice would you give me?
We never do that. Never. At least I will speak for myself. I never do that. And I do have friends that are incredibly successful. My family, we never talked about money. So I love that. Have a conversation about money with someone once a week.
Yeah, that's what my interviews taught me. I learned so much. So then I'd meet someone who was smart or semi-smart, and I'd say, can I just call you up and pick your brain, or can we have some tea? So every day read, every week talk, and every month save. Automatically have money. It can be as little as $20, $25. Money automatically transfer from your checking account or your payroll check to a savings account, because you don't miss what you don't see. And through compounded interest, those savings will add up. So every day read, every week talk, every month save.
So good. Simple, easy to do. And let's talk about savings for a quick second. You know, I realize that the compounded interest, it's better than putting it under your bed, but most institutions, you don't get a lot on that money that you've saved. And I know that there's a much deeper conversation, and I know that we can't go into financial advising at this point, but is there a better place to put that savings when you're just starting out? What would you recommend women do to get a better return of investment on that savings?
First of all, you want to have an emergency, a savings for emergency. Mm-hmm. Because the thing you want to be careful of is that when you have an emergency, like a couple years ago, we needed a new roof. All of a sudden, the roof started leaking.
In the Great Northwest, I know that that's very possible. Right?
It rained a lot, but the roof hadn't leaked for 20 some years. So we had to get a new roof, $70,000. I had it. I didn't have to cash in my investments at a loss.
Right.
Go into credit card debt. I had it. So I want everybody to, I don't care if you're not getting anything from it. I don't care if you're getting less than 1%. You put it somewhere so that if you have an emergency, you don't have to go into debt or take out your investments at a loss. Mm-hmm. And then, where would they put their money? So in cash, money market, nowadays, nobody pays good interest rates. This part, the savings, is not about making money. It's so you don't go into debt and you don't have to sell your stocks.
Yeah.
And then you can start investing. I love digital investing. It's called robo investing. It's wonderful. And the important thing to know about investing is investing is risky. It seems safe to have all your money in cash, but the biggest risk you take in cash is that your money will not grow faster than inflation and taxes take it away. And our risk as women is not that the market will go down, because it always does, but it always goes back up too. Our biggest risk is that we will outlive our money. So at least some of our money needs to be in assets like stocks, bonds, and real estate that go faster than inflation and taxes can take it away.
Great advice, Barbara. Thank you so much. For that woman who is just starting out and she's really intrigued and she knows that she needs to really rewire for wealth, which I love that. What would be the next step that you would recommend? Read your book, download the ebook, connect with you. What's the next step?
Yeah, all of the above. I have an online community called the Wealth Connection. And it's been a dream. It's like 2 or 3 years old now, but it was a dream of mine to have a place where women could come and talk about money as women. And I would love everyone to go to my website, Barbara-Huson, Huson, Barbara-Huson, and check it out. So that's a great way to start. And we have coaching, group coaching, we have experts, we do master classes, all of that. Start talking to your friends. Start talking to your friends about money. Start a book club, a financial book club, and you read books about money. In fact, there was a study at Emory University not long ago. Well, actually, it was quite a few years ago now. They found that women, they did brain scans on women, and they found they did best when they learned about finances collaboratively in a group.
Interesting.
Yes, because we're so relationship oriented.
But we are. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me very much. I think women as a whole like to work in a group and be together. Yeah, collective.
So start a group, start a book club. Lots of women, because I speak at a lot of them. They have book clubs, financial book clubs. And check out my website.
That's a great idea. We'll definitely add the link. And Barbara, you've given us so much to think about and so much insight, reminding the listener right now that if wealth seems to elude you or you have a hard time, you feel attracting money, it most likely is a connection between the brain and the mind. Would you say?
Yes, it was probably, yes. It all boils down. Everything boils down.
It's not capability, right? It's not talent. It's not drive.
Right.
That crazy little thing between the ears that, in so many ways keeps us.
I'm going to tell you that I really believe that women's difficulties with money and I've been doing this for 25 years, and I can say this with deep conviction. Our difficulties with money has little, if anything, to do with money per se. It has everything to do with our fear of or ambivalence about power. We don't understand power from a feminine perspective. And my definition of a powerful woman is someone who knows who she is, who knows what she wants, and expresses that in the world unapologetically. So essentially, our fear of power is our fear of becoming all of who we're meant to be, so that we can become a woman who can be a container that attracts, that sustains, and that can grow our wealth.
Well, I was going to ask you what inspired living means to you, Barbara, but your definition of a powerful woman kind of sums it up for me. Is there anything you'd want to add? What does inspired living mean to you?
Anything done with love.
Oh.
Anything done with love. We can inspire ourselves by loving ourselves. I think creating wealth is an act of love. It's an act of love, self-love, because none of us should have to stay in any situation we can't afford. And it's act of love for the world, because it's not only having money, it's what we can do with our money to make a difference.
Yes, that is why I love you, because we speak that language and we see that vision and we feel that for women. And I just can't thank you enough for your time and your insight. And I will make sure that we put all of those links in the blog post and the show notes. And my friend, please make sure you reach out to Barbara, because it's time for women to rise up. It is time for women, I say, to put their money where their passion is, to be able to sit at the table having these powerful conversations. Because if the world is truly going to change, more women need to come together and make a difference. And I hate to say it, but one way we do that is by investing in things that matter to us. So Barbara, thank you so much. I love the work that you're doing in the world, and I can't wait to see how we collaborate moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You've just heard another uplifting episode of Inspired Living with Keri Murphy, the podcast. I hope you loved it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you'd like to know more about Inspired Living or to get your hands on many of our awesome free resources, such as the Be Studio Ready Guide, simply visit us at inspiredliving.tv/podcast. Remember, your vision is your destiny, and we're here to help you bring it to life. Join me again next week for another extraordinary episode.